Welcome, everybody. Warm welcome to you from IBECC. We're so glad that you decided to join us this year. And we're having a wonderful competition thus far. And I hope that it was a good experience for you to spend time with this process of identifying ethical issues. And as you know, we've been at this for a long time and people really tend to have a really good time at our programs, even though it is a little bit on the stressful side. My name is Jim Arnold. I'm on the board of directors of IBECC. I have been with IBECC for 16 years now. And this is our 26th year of competition. My background is I was a professor at University of St. Thomas, which is in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we used to bring teams to IBECC. And so I've seen the world from your standpoint as well. I was an advisor, just like you were prior to joining the organization. So I do understand what you're going through, and I congratulate you for just going out for it and doing this, and glad you found it to be a good experience. We're going to have each of the judges introduce themselves first, tell you a little bit about themselves. We'll come back, we'll have you introduce yourselves, and then I just have another minute of instruction for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, Nancy, would you start off?
Hi, Nancy Gregory. I'm a certified fraud examiner and
Yeah.
16 years building fraud cases for litigators and other fiduciaries, and then pivoted into healthcare compliance.
Great, thank you. Carl, would you introduce yourself?
Well, hi, I'm Carl Oliver. I'm retired from the ethics office at Northrop Grumman Corporation. And I'm the co-author of a book, Business Ethics, The Path to Certainty. And I've been with IBECC for several decades now.
Thank you, Carl. And Caroline, hello. Can you introduce yourself, please? We'll need you to turn on your volume.
I have worked throughout New York City, including Rikers Island, and in communities where drugs were prevalent. So I've been very involved in this and in public management programs that involve drugs. And I'm still teaching.
Thank you very much. I have one quick thing to read to you. Say, Liam, you know, you're the most important person in the room. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay,
Yes.
my name is Liam Mazer. I am a social studies teacher. I've been volunteering with IBECC for several years, mostly on the technical side. You may know Tim Mazer, who is judging some various sessions this year. He is related to me, which is my nepotistic, but we won't talk about it.
Thank you. What you do is so important. I just wanted you to be recognized. I have a paragraph to read to you. You've seen this before because it's on our website. We just read it before every session so that everybody starts on a level playing field, but this is not going to be new information for you. In this part of the competition, you are taking on a fictional business identity and assigning a fictional business identity to the judges. In our case, the identity that we have, is what? Tell us again who we are.
We have to advisor, executive officer.
There we go, executive officers. Yes, thank you. Please make sure everyone knows who you are and who they are before you begin. You will have 25 minutes with a 5-minute cushion to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem and to recommend a solution that passes muster on all 3 counts. During this time, we will not interrupt you. When you are finished, the judges will ask you questions for about 20 minutes. And during the Q&A, both you and the judges will stay in character. It's important you stay in character as your top hat consulting. We will stay in character as the executives. Some important things to keep in mind. The ethical aspects of your analysis are the most important. However, these should be described in a simple, practical, common sense fashion. Using technical philosophical terminology or basing your argument on religious or theological grounds will be considered a serious mistake. Similarly, any member of the team reading his or her part of the presentation will also be considered a major mistake, although you can use notes. During this presentation, every member of the team must have some sort of speaking role. After we do our 20 minutes of Q and A for you, we'll spend about 10 minutes giving you some feedback on your presentation. If you choose to use any of that for your presentation tomorrow, your 10-minute or your 90-second, you're welcome to do so, but there isn't an expectation that you do that. So it's only meant to be valuable to you if you find it that way. Any questions for you from you? We're set to go. Wonderful. Well, once again, welcome to IBECC, and you can start whenever you like.
Fentanyl, a substance so potent that just 2 milligrams is enough to kill an adult through an overdose. For reference, that's only about this much. Yes, that is the tip of a pencil. I know it doesn't look dangerous, but this amount of this drug is killing people across the country. One place that we're seeing an alarming increase of fentanyl-related deaths is on college and university campuses, where students may turn to counterfeit or street versions of popular drugs such as Adderall or Xanax in order to combat various social pressures or mental health issues that are common on college campuses. Drug dealers make a massive profit by producing fentanyl, which is very cheap to produce, and packaging it as other drugs or using it to make these other drugs go further. This is an issue because these students are our future and they deserve to have access to the life-saving fentanyl education and resources, and they're not getting it, and so they're dying all across the country. On the screen behind me, we have some images of popular drugs on college campuses, Adderall and Xanax. And as you can see, it's very difficult to tell the real drug from the counterfeit version. Here we have Adderall, which is a stimulant drug used to treat symptoms of ADHD and increase focus. It's been popular among college students for decades. But one phenomenon that we're seeing actually in recent years is those who are prescribed Adderall are still occasionally turning to counterfeit or street versions of the drug due to an increase of shortages in pharmacies. Next, we have Xanax, which is a drug used to treat symptoms of anxiety. And again, it is popular among college students. Xanax is actually produced by Pfizer, but it's being counterfeited by these illicit labs and sold to the masses, and oftentimes contains fentanyl and can be deadly. And this is why we believe that Pfizer does have a vested interest in stopping the fentanyl crisis on college campuses. One, to protect the integrity of your product, and two, to just protect your stakeholders and those around them. We're going to talk a lot about business today, but we want to make sure that you understand the core ethical reasoning, the core reason why we think this program is important, and that's the students themselves. This is Madeline Globe, a 21-year-old student from Colorado who died within hours of taking a $5 pill that she believed was Xanax, which is used to treat anxiety. The pill was laced with fentanyl and she lost her life. Madeline is not the only victim to this fentanyl epidemic. In fact, it's happening to students across the country. We want you to remember Madeline and the students like her as we move throughout a proposal and just understand why it is so important, why this should be your core why. So good afternoon, Pfizer executives. My name is Sadie Jensen, and these are my colleagues.
I'm John Owen.
I'm Isabella Videmar, and I'm Emerson. And today we represent Top Hat Consulting. So you've called in to positively expand Pfizer's outreach. We believe we found a way to do that through helping Pfizer assist in fighting the fentanyl epidemic on university campuses. So let's see what our presentation will entail today. First, we will lay out a detailed description of the program that we're proposing ourselves. It is called the Pfizer Forward Fund. There'll be more on that in a minute. We'll then go through legal, financial, and ethical implications of putting this program into practice before wrapping up with a conclusion and giving you time for questions. Without further ado, let's begin. As I mentioned, our proposal is the Pfizer Forward Fund, which is a one-time grant given to 11 universities in West Virginia. Now, we selected West Virginia as our top target demographic because of the fact that it's the state that is ranked #1 in per capita deaths by fentanyl overdose. This demonstration behind me shows the rising number of general overdoses in the state of West Virginia, 76% of which in 2021 were responsible by fentanyl. We believe that public school students at universities in West Virginia are the most vulnerable demographic, the ones we are targeting, because those universities pull directly from that already vulnerable West Virginia population. So when we talk about fighting the fentanyl crisis in general and on campuses, there seem to be two main lines of discourse that we're seeing. There is a tough love approach and a harm reduction approach. The tough love approach focuses on not destigmatizing drugs and actually keeping drugs and their users away from the public and through prevention and strict policy. The harm reduction approach accepts that drug use is a modern problem. It's a part of our current society, but really focuses its efforts on minimizing damaging effects of those drugs. Pfizer is actually already leaning in a little bit into this harm reduction approach through partnering with the Fight the Fakes Alliance, which spreads awareness, and donating life-saving doses of naloxone to direct relief, so be distributed to the public. But we believe that the most effective method in fighting the fentanyl crisis on college campuses is one that satisfies both ends of the spectrum, combining tough love and harm reduction tactics. And that's what the Pfizer Forward Fund is designed to do. It doesn't destigmatize drugs, but it also doesn't dehumanize the students that use them. So how does our program actually satisfy that tough love approach? We satisfy the tough love approach through recommending various policies the colleges participating can choose to implement, one of which that we want to highlight is our second chance promise. The second chance promise is designed to have a way for students to come back after their first drug offense without worrying that they'll be dismissed from the university. This is great because it shows students that they're more than the drug they struggled with. They don't have to hide in shame. So it will increase that trust in the university and in Pfizer, but it also will ultimately decrease drug use on campus, increase caution surrounding drug use on campus, because the policy is, as it suggests, a second chance, not a third chance, not a fourth chance, a second chance. And that's because the Pfizer Forward program is designed ultimately to provide a drug-free campus, a safe campus for students tomorrow. Next, we have how do we satisfy the harm reduction approach. We wanted to give the students the power in this portion of the policy, and that is through enlisting volunteer student ambassadors to help their peers. They would act as boots on the ground for the program. They'll spread word about the dangers of counterfeit drugs. They'll host outreach programs. One that we came up with was potentially providing a naloxone training at first year orientation. This would teach students how to save their friends in the event of an overdose, turning them from bystanders and victims into heroes with autonomy. Next, we also hope the fund will expand already existing resource access. For example, if universities offer counseling services, but they don't actually have them paid, or they have a limited number paid, the program would ultimately help fund those sessions for students, because one of the driving factors in drug use on campus is, again, mental health. So we're kind of nipping that problem in the bud. Additionally, the money would be used to help staff that are working with the student ambassadors, to train them, to train the ambassadors, necessary certifications, and then creating opioid overdose test kits that would be distributed to students, again, putting them in charge of their own success. We understand that Pfizer is a business, and as wonderful as this program sounds, you'll want to understand the legal, ethical, financial implications so you can make a strategic decision. And again, that's why my colleagues are here today. So I'll first turn the time over to John, who will discuss the legal implications of investing in this program. John?
It goes without saying that the legal implications of the opioid crisis have been and will continue to be huge. Lawsuits over who is responsible for the rising drug overdoses in this country are popping up everywhere. In fact, since the year 2000, over 300,000 lives have been claimed by the opioid epidemic. Heroin and illicitly laced fentanyl account for an increasingly disproportionate number of opioid-involved overdoses. As this proportion has grown, so has the frequency and profile of lawsuits against opioid manufacturers. Early on in the crisis, these lawsuits were personal injury claims filed on behalf of individuals with addiction who overdosed. However, as the population harmed by opioids has grown, it has become easier to identify subgroups within this population, leading to class action lawsuits with much larger settlements. In fact, according to KFF Health, an estimated $50 billion in settlement funds is being paid out to state governments across the country. And although the companies paying these settlements technically do not admit fault, they face severe damage to their reputations. And this has a residual effect on the entire opioid industry. Like it or not, these companies are being labeled as indifferent to the opioid crisis. And when it comes to you, Pfizer, the appearance of indifference is just as bad as actual indifference. If you're labeled as neglecting the opioid epidemic, you could slip into a downward spiral, losing stakeholders' trust, leading to decreased sales and difficulty in launching new products. But by funding this program, you would be able to demonstrate your commitment to significant action against fentanyl overdoses. Given the huge reputational damage associated with lawsuits, in order to ensure that you comply with all legal requirements, our program is designed to fit into West Virginia State Code, Chapter 16, Article 46, Section 5. This law limits liability for healthcare providers and other organizations distributing naloxone. According to the code, all individuals must go through specialized training prior to distributing naloxone. Therefore, all the staff at the universities would go through specialized instruction in order to ensure zero liability when distributing the naloxone. Not only does this training give you the opportunity to distribute naloxone without liability, it also gives you a chance to make sure that these ambassadors are representative of your core values of courage, excellence, equity, and joy. Clearly, the legal and reputational damage of the opioid crisis is huge for you. With this program, we can ensure that your reputation as a company striving for excellence is not just sustained, but guaranteed. And by designing our program around West Virginia State Code, Chapter 16, Article 46, Section 5, you can ensure that you are protected from a perception of indifference, will build your political capital, and it'll shield you from costly lawsuits. With our recommendation, you would be able to ensure legal and reputational stability, taking control of your perception and building the path to a better and safer future. Now that we've addressed the legal aspects of our program, I'd like to hand it off to my colleague Bella for the financial analysis.
Thank you, John. Ladies and gentlemen, as we dive into our financial projections, let's address the critical question at hand. How much is this project going to cost? Well, allow me to guide you through our budgeting process and rationale. To streamline our efforts and address the pressing needs, we chose to focus on 11 public universities in West Virginia. While these institutions vary in size, they have been chosen precisely to ensure comprehensive coverage. Here's a list of them from largest student population to smallest student population. After assessing the enrollment figures for the year 2023 for each institution, we began calculating 10% and 15% of each student body of each institution. Now, you may be wondering why we made this decision. Well, our decision was informed by the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, which revealed that 6.3% of college students in West Virginia have reported non-medical drug use in 2020. To ensure a comprehensive approach as well as account for potential underreporting, we have opted for a conservative 10% number, as well as for expanding in the future 15%. This strategic target allows for our resources to be strategically allocated to achieve our program's objectives. For clarity, we have developed 3 scenarios to illustrate varying levels of intervention. In our base case scenario represents precisely 6.3% of the reported student demographic engaging in non-medical drug use. Expanding to a broader student population at 10% is in the better case scenario, in which, again, we account for potential underreporting of drug usage. And finally, our best case scenario, which we are recommending to you, Pfizer, to consider, is expanding our outreach to 15% of the student body. We believe this is the best case scenario because not only does it allow Pfizer's intervention to go beyond the reported demographic, but extend the resources to address a broader community at risk. And it also serves as a strategic foundation for future expansion should you decide to further invest into this program. Our budget is allocated primarily to these 4 objectives. All of these objectives have been organized based on their varying levels of expense, with 10 representing the highest level of expense. At the top, we have counseling sessions, then followed by naloxone boxes per student, then the ambassador stipends, and finally, the fentanyl test strips. This strategic allocation ensures that all of our resources are efficiently used to achieve our program's objectives. Diving into the counseling services, our counseling team has done the research and looked into the counseling services provided by each university. Through thorough research, we have uncovered that all targeted universities offer free and unlimited counseling services to the students. Now, while this is great, it is important to note that should there be a need for future expansion outside of the state of West Virginia, this may not always be the case. However, in our pilot program, this means that there is a zero expense for counseling sessions in our specific situation. However, this will mean that our program ambassadors will play a crucial role in encouraging these students who are struggling in mental health and drug usage to take use of these resources. Our budget allocation, we have prioritized providing opioid overdose prevention kits to each student. This is imperative as it addresses the potential emergencies that may arise, as well as promote student safety. Each overdose prevention kit will include a naloxone box, which is typically priced at $45 per box according to GoodRx, and it will include 2 4-milligram spray containers capable of reversing the overdose effects of fentanyl twice, as well as 5 fentanyl testing strips, which are typically priced at $1 per strip. To illustrate the importance of what naloxone is and why these testing kits are important, allow me to introduce naloxone to you, for those of you who may not be familiar with the drug and its usage. This is naloxone. Naloxone is a drug that is taken by a nasal spray and reverses the overdosing effects of fentanyl. Its effects in doing this will return the breathing levels to normal within 2 to 3 minutes, saving a life in the event that an unintentional overdose. While we do not have fentanyl testing strips with us today, they look very similar to the screen here. These are harm reduction tools that recognize that students may choose to acquire and use these drugs instead of the real ones that you produce. While accepting that, this will give the students opportunity to test those counterfeit drugs for traces of fentanyl before they use them. By providing naloxone and fentanyl testing strips to these students, we are giving them control as we put life-saving tools in their hands. In our base case scenario, which targets 6.3% of our student body, we have accounted for approximately 4,005 naloxone boxes per student, which will total you a cost around $180,000. Whereas expanding to include fentanyl testing strips, which will be around 20,000 fentanyl testing strips, this will total cost in your base case scenario will be around $200,000. Expanding to an outreach of 10% of the student body in the better case scenario will account for 2,352 more naloxone boxes, as well as 11,700 fentanyl testing strips. Your total for the better case scenario will be $317,000 roughly. And finally, in our best case scenario, to cover the cost for the additional naloxone boxes and fentanyl testing strips, your prevention kits will cost you around $470,000. Moving on to our ambassador stipends. To appropriately allocate the amount of ambassador to student ratio, we researched the student to faculty ratio in the state of West Virginia in every public university. And we found that the average is around 20 students to 1 faculty member. For the purposes of our program, we will be replacing each faculty member with 1 student ambassador who is capable of managing a group of roughly 20 students. Building upon this analysis, we drew insights from a similar opioid overdose education program based in New York City, who also provides similar training to their staff members. Through their model, we have concluded that it would cost around $90 per student ambassador, which with 9 months in this academic year, that would account around $810 per student per academic year. In our ambassador stipend costs, in the base case scenario, it will cost you around $160,000 for all student ambassadors, $260,000 in the better case scenario, and then finally in the best case scenario, it will cost you around $390,000 to fully fund all ambassadors. In summarizing our final projections, excluding overhead costs, as well as mentioned before, since we will not be accounting for the counseling sessions in this case, our budget proposal is $360,000 in the base case scenario, $575,000 in the better case scenario, and finally, the best case scenario, in which we implore you, Pfizer, to consider for the sakes of our students' lives is $860,000 investment. Now that we have gone through the financial analysis, let me transfer it into the ethical section, which will be led by my colleague Emma.
Thank you, Bella. So now that we've gone over the financial implications of promoting this Pfizer Forward Fund, I would now like to dive into the ethical analysis that Pfizer will be facing. First, I'd like to draw attention to the stakeholders that are being affected by this fentanyl crisis on college and university campuses. Now, of course, the most important stakeholder is the students, but we realize there are other stakeholders in the situation as well. In addition to the students, we have students' parents and families, these college universities and their faculty and staff members, the community as a whole, and you, Pfizer. Now, it is our utmost priority that we consider the safety of these students and that Pfizer has a responsibility to do a moral duty and ethical duty toward combating this social problem. Pfizer should consider giving respect, caring for, and giving these individuals their autonomy. Now, considering that Pfizer is one of the top most influential pharmaceutical companies around the world, and that it produces Xanax, which is one of the most common drugs cut and laced with fentanyl, we believe that Pfizer has a moral and ethical duty towards this issue. In addition, a business moral principle is that businesses should do no harm. Now, by implementing this program, Pfizer is not only doing no harm, but they are also increasing good. If you look at Pfizer's company values of excellence, equity, joy, courage, we believe that implementing our program directly aligns with these values. Taking a look directly from Pfizer about how they are committed to their patients and how they are committed to their company values, you can see they quoted, "We consider not only patients, but everyone they touch, including their families, caregivers, and friends, and everything they love to do. It is intentionally a holistic view. Every decision we make, every action we take is done with our patient in mind, and to nurture an environment where breakthroughs can strive." Now, considering what you, Pfizer, say, we believe that implementing our program not only directly correlates to your company values, but how you are committed to your patients. This leads me directly into corporate social responsibility. Now, corporate social responsibility business model, often known as CSR, highlights the triple bottom line, or the 3 Ps. Now, these 3 Ps include people, planet, and profit. Now, with implementing our recommended pilot program, Pfizer would be able to capitalize on 2 of these 3 Ps. Those would be profit and people. Profit. We know Pfizer, your business, and other businesses around the world are concerned with the profits they are producing and the revenue that is coming in. Now, with the CSR business model, it does focus on the social responsibility, but has often been proven to be a great financial strategy. This financial strategy and the financial benefits are just a perk on top of the social benefit and impact that Pfizer would be producing in the industry and around the world. They will be able to generate revenue for years to come and be the first to come in and fight this battle against the fentanyl crisis. And they will get positive impact from their stakeholders and the industry. Next is the people. Now, yes, profit is extremely important, but we believe in this scenario that the main focus should be the people. That Pfizer should be setting a new standard and showing that Pfizer cares and they have a responsibility towards this matter. Show that their ethical and moral duties will be demonstrated and that they can use their platform as good. With an influential company like Pfizer yourself promoting this program and be able to combat the fentanyl crisis, we believe that it will show other industries and it will be a great social impact for your company. Considering that the leading cause of death for young people, and particularly ages 18 to 45, is fentanyl overdose, we believe that Pfizer has a responsibility in this and helping combat this issue and seeing how they matter and how they can combat this fentanyl crisis. So now that I've gone into some of the ethical analysis of this case, I'd like to bring our attention back to Sadie. Thank you, Emma, for highlighting the immense ethical implications of this case. The Pfizer Forward Fund is not only the right thing to do ethically, it's the best thing for your business. And we can't think of a better solution than one that puts both of those things hand in hand. We've talked about all of the good benefits financially and legally, reputation, political capital, dividends toward your company as people trust you more. But let's return back to our why from the beginning. Madeline, but not only Madeline, hundreds of students like her across the country. All of them robbed too soon of their lives, not because they were habitual drug users or addicted to using fentanyl, but because due to mental health conditions or perhaps due to social pressures, they took something that they thought was safe and it ended up being laced with fentanyl, robbing them of their youth and their future. These students did not deserve to meet the demise that they did. In fact, they deserve to be here tomorrow, just like everyone here deserves to be here tomorrow. Pfizer has an opportunity to save lives like the ones of these students before it's too late across America. Yes, the program is piloted in West Virginia, but as you expand potentially in the future, as other universities see what's happening with the Pfizer-sponsored universities, they're going to want to help their students too. Through investing in the Pfizer Forward Fund, we have the opportunity to move forward together. Thank you, and we now open the floor to any questions.
Okay. Very nice, thank you. Now, keeping our hats on as executives again, we'll have a few questions for you. I have one that sounds deceptively simple, but what I'd like you to do is specifically and concisely as possible answer the following question. What makes this issue an ethical issue?
Aren't all issues ethical issues at heart, especially ones that have potential to prevent harm? That being said, we'll get more specific for you to answer your question. Pfizer is one of the most influential pharmaceutical companies in the world. They have immense impact. And so famous quote says, with great power comes great responsibility. There's a large potential for harm in these students because of the fact that drug dealers are counterfeiting Pfizer's drugs, other pharmaceutical companies as well, but we're focusing on Pfizer today. And Pfizer has the opportunity to step in. Maybe we can't stop every drug dealer, but we can arm the students with the autonomy to protect themselves and protect their peers. So this becomes an ethical issue because it reduces harm, but even better than that, it's increasing good. And so that is why we believe this issue is an ethical issue that is honestly at the forefront of what we should be focusing on.
Thank you, Nancy.
That was an excellent response.
We're staying in character, but yes.
Yeah, but even as a board member, excellent response. I guess one of my questions is, you're saying that this is going to be a grant program, correct? So is that going to be through a foundation at Pfizer, or is that going to just be through Pfizer itself?
Well, as projected in the financial projected proposal, it will probably be through the foundational aspect, just because it's more a do good for the benefits of Pfizer.
Okay, excellent, because if you did an educational grant, you actually cannot do that through the law, because an educational grant, there can be no benefit to the company. So great that you thought about that. I guess one of my questions is talking about giving stipends to ambassadors who are going to sort of help spread the word to the student body about the dangers of non-medical drug use, potential fentanyl being laced into those drugs. But are these students really going to be qualified to do this kind of work, which is most commonly been performed by social workers, for instance, or healthcare professionals? It seems to me that Pfizer might have some exposure there, that they might be doing, further harm by having people who are not qualified spreading this information.
Yeah. So that's why obviously, we need to comply with the law, which states that anyone distributing naloxone has to go through special training. The upside of that is that it also gives you the opportunity to make sure that the students are qualified. In looking at other programs throughout the country, we found that student-to-student relationships tend to be more effective than a student to maybe a medical staff or a counselor. And that would be part of the student ambassador's job, would be facilitating a relationship with the student. And if they need to move to a doctor, then they can.
So would there be training not only on the administration of, naloxone?
Yeah.
Would there also be training on how they interface
Yes.
with students on campus?
To add on to what John said, which, thank you, John. These students, we're targeting more of a personable approach to create a safe space for students who are struggling with drug abuse to come to a peer and talk to them about things that they're struggling with. Where while you may be concerned about the training and qualifications of these students, they're not going to be doing anything medically wise, but they're directing these students who are struggling to resources that can help them, as well as I think the ambassador stipends mainly will be advocated towards the training of like knowledge about the drug, knowledge about the epidemic, knowledge about the resources that we will allocate to them, as well as how to use the kits and fentanyl test strips, things like that to their peers.
Have you thought about the privacy issues involved with, trying to get students into these programs, how you can protect their privacy so that they're not somehow targeted, by the administration or, any other enforcement agency?
Yeah, I can answer this for you. So that is a large part of where these fentanyl overdose kits and the harm reduction aspect of it all comes into play. So if a student feels apt to talking to someone, then they're able to come to their peer, go to the counselor, things like that. Maybe they walk by and see a tabling event from these ambassadors talking about how you can find help. But the perk of the harm reduction approach is that it does accept, look, we don't want them to use drugs. Some students are still going to use drugs. Let's give them a kit so that if they do use the drug, they are safe. So that really protects the confidentiality, and that many students will be getting these kits. If there is an overdose that happens and we'd love for them to call for help. A lot of students we've seen in different studies they're able to distribute the help that they need with their naloxone. They're able to test the drugs with the fentanyl test strip before using them. And ultimately, we hope that helps protect the confidentiality and increase caution when these drugs are being used.
So they will be anonymized in
Yes.
some
Yes.
way then?
Yes.
Hey, Carl?
Okay, I'm a student. And I didn't test this drug I'm gonna take because it's in a proper bottle and has proper label on it. But I don't feel so good when I took this. How fast do I get help? Where do I go?
Well, it depends because fentanyl has been proven it can kill you almost instantly, even if you're around it. Like many police officers have stories of being around fentanyl and being near or touching them. So it obviously depends on how much you are consuming. But if you feel and you're aware and know what an overdose feels like, you can be able to either self-administrate it because we are providing the students with the kits, or if they feel comfortable enough coming to a student or even a counselor or a faculty member. It just honestly depends on the dosage. And in your case, you don't necessarily know. So it would be smart to administer naloxone anyway if you feel like maybe this is an overdose, because even if you administer naloxone, you are harmed. If you're not having an overdose, it's okay to administer it. It's fine.
Do I have to be trained to administer the Nexalone?
No.
So we mentioned in the presentation that we would ideally have at first year orientation, for example, some sort of training on how to use naloxone so that every incoming student would be exposed to how to use it. And they would be, before given the kits would be given to all first year students. So it's kind of anonymized.
Caroline has submitted some questions. She's my hers by chat. Is this a program that other institutions can pick up, and how will you go about that?
This is a pilot program, but it's designed, as Bella mentioned, with the funding, we've made projections in case it did want to expand, maybe to a university that didn't offer counseling, maybe to a university outside of Virginia. The first year grant would be just targeting these pilot universities, but the program is designed that it could expand in the future if it's successful and if it's something that Pfizer wants to continue investing in.
What about all the kids that are not in universities?
Well, as we mentioned, there's over $50 billion in settlement funds being paid across the country to state governments. And one of the reasons we wanted to target universities is that these funds are going through the government, which may not end up, and the funds may not end up getting to the right places as quickly as they could unless Pfizer stepped in. However, in regard to the students who aren't at the universities, West Virginia has a fund of $367 million that's going to be distributed across the state to police officers, to community centers in order to help those students.
Okay. So what you're saying is those unfortunate people who can't afford a secondary education, that you'd still be able to reach them with this concept. That's what I hear you saying. Thank you. And has any part of this been implemented? That I think what Dr. Westerhoff means here is there any evidence that this has already been started any place, whether it's by Pfizer or anything else? Did you base your analysis on anything that is already existing, even if it's only a pilot project?
Okay, so specifically for the financial projections, I based one of my findings on a similar opioid overdose education program based in New York City, who also has trained staff members who are designed to go into drug centers, like rehab centers, to help the people there in education about opioids and whatnot. But expanding into the education realm, we did find many cases of students displaying interest in wanting a program like this, such as Stanford. There is a student there who also started an initiative for opioid overdose prevention and has gotten lots of attention. And another place is Virginia State. There's a professor there who started a naloxone bike where he distributes naloxone to students who are walking by and educates them about the opioid overdose.
Thank you. Nancy, did you have any other questions at all? Are you okay? Fantastic. Okay. Thank you very much. Now we can take our hats off and become just us again and give you just a little bit of feedback. I'll start with Dr. Westerhoff's feedback. She really appreciated that you limited your scope to West Virginia, and I would agree with that. I thought it was a great idea to just keep it small so that we can really grasp what you're talking about. I think it would have been a mistake to try and say, let's do this across the entire country. What you're saying is let's start small and build. I think that's an excellent, excellent idea. I personally really liked your presentation. I thought it was extremely clear. What I don't tell people ahead of time is that I've taught public speaking for about 20 years now. And because I think it would psych people out if I told them that too early. But I'm telling you now because I think that your presentation was exemplary, and I think a lot of people could learn a lot from you on how to make a business presentation. You were extremely clear. One of the most difficult things for me to teach is the idea of transitions between speakers. Your transitions were excellent. Things like now that we know this, let's do this. So and so talked about this, let's do this. It was just beautifully done from the standpoint of delivering. Your content was extremely well explained. So I was very impressed. Thank you. Nancy?
I would have to mirror that. This is the third presentation I've seen, and by far the most outstanding of the three.
I think this is a very realistic presentation. You're not taking on the whole industry. You, and West Virginia, I know the medical area is very studious and successful. I think you ought to contact also, with your school's permission, the president of Pfizer. I think he is very realistic. And therefore you can dig in to that particular aspect in that environment. I worked in the South Bronx in a college. I set up the first 2-year degree public administration program on the East Coast. And before classes begin, I would walk into a room filled with people who had been on drugs. And the comment would be, she's going to get hurt. No, I simply said, your tax dollars are paying for this. Come on in with me. And that seemed to help. So I think in that perspective, you can be very successful and other people can model you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy, continue.
Yeah, I thought you were all incredibly articulate. You were the first group who did not address us as you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We've had a discussion about being called you guys for
Right,
all
and
day
you know,
long.
You used the
The
proper.
proper way to address the board is not you guys.
So you figured that. You were also incredibly good on feet with the questions. You know, I think you were thoughtful before you answered, and then you kind of looked amongst each other to see who was the, you know, the best person to be positioned to answer the question. I loved your monochromatic dressing.
We don't score on that, but yeah.
But the presentation is everything. I would
Absolutely.
say one thing to be conscious of, two of you keep standing in front of the screen, which is very distracting. I think it's always best to not have people divided on the screen, but you all to be on one side of the screen. So I would just, that might be something you could think about going forward. But otherwise, really a flawless presentation, highly convincing. And liking it, I loved the fact that the first 3 students brought out fun. Ethics is all about harm. No one has really been talking about that. So great that you did that.
Which is one of the reasons why we always start with that question, what makes this an ethical issue? You nailed it. So
Yes.
very, very good. Carl, do you have some feedback, please?
Well, I'm watching remotely and nobody was standing in front of my screen. I saw the charts just fine. I thought the presentation was clear and professional, well organized. I'm not sure that there are 3 faces of ethics. Some people think ethics is what individuals do in the company. Some people think ethics is about how a company complies with the law. Some people think ethics is about what a company does to help out the community, corporate social responsibility. And you accurately place this in the CSR environment. So if we broaden the definition of ethics to include all 3 of those categories, you've got an ethics presentation. I thought it was clearly stated and well done.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for us at all before we adjourn? Okay, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you today. Good luck. Thank you, judges.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. It was very inspiring.
Thank